Welcome back into New York City and Writer's Block. I'm your host, Bill Reiter, here on CBS Sports HQ for the next 30 minutes. We're going to get into Sean McVay and what's going to come from the beatdown Bill Belichick put on him. A very, very happy Baron Davis is going to join me on the show, two-time former NBA All-Star. And we'll go inside the numbers on the trade that is yet to lure AD to the Lakers. That and much more starts right now. All right, let's do a little more Super Bowl talk while we still can, because even though the NFL draft is around the corner, we're moving away from football in the news. And I think in Bill Belichick's opus, which we discussed yesterday, something's been lost about Sean McVay and what went down Sunday, other than the beatdown that he experienced firsthand against the greatest head coach in the history of the game. And that is this takeaway. Not that McVay is a failure or is going to be, but maybe Super Bowl 53 is the most important moment of McVay's career. I'm a big believer, and if you talk to people in professional sports, they are too, the ones that have had true success, that failure is the true crucible often for greatness. You can go to highfalutin examples like Winston Churchill or FDR, and certainly sports is filled with reminders that truly talented individuals, future geniuses, future all-time greats, found the best versions of themselves at their lowest moments. Let's start with the guy who just humiliated Sean McVay on national television. Bill Belichick now is a six-time Super Bowl champion. He's the greatest coach in the history of the NFL and maybe modern American sports. But this is somebody who spent 5 years basically failing with the Cleveland Browns. Remember, in those 5 seasons, a combined 36-44 with an organization that has often defined ugliness and losing. When Bill Belichick finally was let go in Cleveland, many people thought his days as a success story were behind him. In fact, the Patriots themselves, that dynasty that continues to be a marvel and certainly was a couple days ago in the big game, went from 2004 to 2014, 10 years, a decade. That's longer than most careers, not winning a single Super Bowl. I saw one up close and personal, covered LeBron James back in the Miami days, and he went from being beloved in Cleveland to that first year in Miami, an embarrassment, who was criticized and who absolutely choked in the big moment. Remember, hubris and how to handle it, expectations and how to grapple with them, the sycophants around you and how to get rid of them, just focus on your craft, aren't easy and can lead you, or if you're LeBron James, to mistakes kind of like this one.
Came down here to win championships. Not one, championships.
Not two.
LeBron, tell us about that.
Not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7.
Yeah, making not one mistake, not two mistakes, 7 mistakes. I can remember a few years later, and I was pretty brutal to LeBron when I was a writer back then covering him. Wouldn't describe him and I as having a particularly good relationship. The Heat, the organization, couldn't stand me. And yet 2 years later, on a television interview, one-on-one with LeBron, he told me that the biggest lesson that he learned from the days after that collapse against the Mavericks, and he collapsed, stopped playing defense, he utterly shrunk, was he went into a room, he closed the door, he turned off the lights, and he luxuriated in his failure, and that brought about, he said, the best version of himself, and we've seen it since then. Now, what a 3-time NBA champion. I think one of the best examples out there is the guy, outside of Saban, who probably has built the second most sure thing as a dynasty in college football, friend of the show, Dabo Swinney. There was a time when Dabo couldn't find a job, when he had to sell insurance to Alabama fans, trying to remind them that he was one of them back in the day when his football career was so over he had to make a living doing something else. But don't take my word for it. This is what he told us when he called into the show not that long ago.
So I was about 30, and that was a tough time for me because I knew what I loved doing. I was passionate about coaching and teaching and all that, but I couldn't get a job.
The biggest lessons that's been true in my career, it's probably been true in yours, is that the things that knock you down are where you learn how to deal with actual and real pressure. Dabo talked about being 30 years old and being in that spot. Sean McVay is just 33, and he's got at least 33 more years to coach if he can do it, as long as Bill Belichick's been doing it. Belichick now 66. Let's go to some player examples. I'm old enough to remember when John Elway was the greatest quarterback that would never win a Super Bowl. He was a failure. He couldn't win the big game. He couldn't get it done. And then at the end of his career, not once but twice, he solidified himself as a Super Bowl champion. First 3 Super Bowl trips in the first 7 seasons, couldn't get the win. Lost by a combined 96 points over that stretch, and he finally did it at the end of his career, and it changed his legacy and the way that we remember. Let's go to another coach. Tom Landry is legendary, but at the start of his attempts to forge his own success story in the NFL, he was nothing short of a failure. First season as the Cowboys coach, not a single win. Next 4 seasons, did not win more than 4 games. Same for Dabo, right? Clemson was really patient with Dabo. Landry got lots and lots of time. He did not make the playoffs until his 7th year in the NFL. Now here, that's not going to happen today, but those failures and the tape in your own mind's eye and the reminder that you can actually get up the next day after being humiliated, if you can stomach it, if you can fight through it, most guys can't, most people can't, is an amazing way to harness natural ability. Let's keep with the Patriots theme. Pete Carroll is a perfect example of this. Had a shot for 3 years with the Patriots, had a pretty good stretch, was middle into mediocre, had a good season at the end of that tenure, and as Robert Kraft later said, the hardest decision of his life, of his career, fired him for Bill Belichick. Not the wrong thing, right, for the Patriots. Bill Belichick went on to be the greatest coach of all time. Not the wrong thing either for Pete Carroll. He took some time off. He was a special teams advisor. He wrote a column for a website, and he talked later about finding his best version of himself. Went to USC, one of the greatest jobs we've ever seen in college football coaching. Went to Seattle, amazing job there. Sean McVay, who's a brilliant guy, who was hyped up, whose dad told us has the miles, don't look at the years, just got the most important lesson that you can get in sports, and that is a humiliation that shapes how you approach the game. And if he can come out of it, and I think that he can, I think there's a chance that when McVay's doing Belichick-like things 10, 15, 20 years from now, we look back and realize that this moment the other day wasn't the low point of his career. It was the beginning of this guy climbing to the top of the sport.
I was not pleased at all with my feel for the flow of the game and kind of making some adjustments as the game unfolded and to giving ourselves a chance to have some success and put some points on the board. And, you know, credit to them, and they did a good job, and I certainly didn't do good enough for us, but they did a great job. It was a great game plan, and, you know, no other way to say it, but I got outcoached tonight.
Michael Jordan not making varsity team his first year in high school. Steph Curry being passed over several times. Draymond Green falling all the way to the second round. Steve Kerr being a failure of a GM and an NFL guy or an NBA guy until he was in a broadcast booth. The list goes on and on. Yes, celebrate the Patriots, absolutely. Yes, point out that Jared Goff wasn't big enough for the moment, and Sean McVay, as he just told you, got absolutely outclassed. But McVay is the things that we told you that he was. McVay is brilliant. He is young. He is committed. He does have a photographic football memory in mind, and now he's got the most important thing in the alchemy that can lead to true greatness, and that's the kind of embarrassment, humility, humiliation that teaches the true greats who can handle it how to get to the level few of us will ever achieve. I believe in Sean McVay, and I think Bill Belichick taught him a lesson that's going to serve him well in the years ahead. All right, that concludes probably, it feels like, our Super Bowl coverage here on Reiter's blog. Maybe we'll sneak some stuff in the next few days, but we're going to turn a lot of talk to the NFL draft and a lot of talk to the NBA. And Baron Davis, longtime NBA player, former 2-time NBA All-Star, is going to join me on the show. I caught up with him earlier in the day, had a really interesting conversation. We'll play that for you when we come back to the program here in just a minute. All right, welcome back to New York City. Earlier today from my place in Brooklyn, I caught up via Skype with Baron Davis, former NBA player, long-term NBA player. Had an interesting conversation. Here it is. All right, as I mentioned, it's the 2-time All-Star, the man behind WTF, Baron Davis, over on Fuse Network. Baron, thanks for making time, man.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I'm really interested to talk to you about this transition to acting after we get through some of these NBA questions. But Anthony Davis topic is a really big topic. What was your first impression when you heard that AD is the latest star who wants to go somewhere else before his deal is up?
I'm not surprised. It's just the nature of the NBA now. I think guys wanting to go and play with other superstars. So I wasn't really surprised, especially with someone like AD, who probably needs a lot more help, and it's difficult than being a superstar and trying to carry the load on a team like New Orleans.
You've been a pretty great player on a bad team before. Can you give us some insight on when you are at that level,
what the frustration feels like as it builds up when you just know you're not going to win as many games or have the chance you want?
Well, I think it just becomes competitive because, all along you've been playing against the same dudes in high school. And when they have a competitive advantage, and their advantage is resulting in wins, and they get to go to the playoffs and have the opportunity to play in the finals, you're sitting watching. And you don't really have that much of a chance or a shot. So I think it becomes highly frustrating. Just having to cope, right? Just having to cope with losing and watching, people that may not be as good as you do well in the playoffs. And so I think for someone like him, it's really about getting his game and himself to the next level.
This has become the new normal. We saw Paul George decide he didn't want to be in Indy. We saw Kawhi Leonard decide he didn't want to be in San Antonio, and it leads Bear into these interesting situations in terms of how much leverage a team has to try to extract the proper amount. The latest report is the Lakers have offered Brandon Ingram, Kyle Kuzma, Lonzo Ball, Rondo, and 2 first-round picks for AD. What is the proper return for Anthony Davis if you're the Pelicans and you're frustrated and you want something back?
I don't know. I don't really know what's in the Pelicans' game plan. They're in a difficult situation because they got a player that don't want to be there, and they still need to put a good product out on the floor. So I think it's important that they stay patient and get what they feel that they can get in order for them to rebuild.
How great is AD? I mean, there's a lot of young superstars. Where does this guy rank for you on the list of, let's say, 5 years from now, being capable of being the best or second best guy on a championship team?
I mean, I think his talent is unmatched. I think that he plays well. His versatility is very unique in what he can do at 7 feet. I just think that he's one of the elite guys, and but just like a lot of them, they need help.
What do you make of the idea that players don't want to play with LeBron James, and that's a complicating factor for the Lakers? Is that a bunch of garbage, or is there something to that?
I think that's just, I don't know. That's just something you said. I don't know. I think that's, it's just rumors. You don't really know if those are facts or not.
We know what the Warriors are. We know what they've done. The East has a lot of good teams. Let's just say the Lakers and Magic Johnson land the guy they want. They get, in the next few days, Anthony Davis. What does an Anthony Davis and LeBron James team, minus a lot of those young guys, what's their upside this season? Is that a team that can make a run to a Western Conference Finals?
No. Nope. It's not going to happen. I think that, you're in a competitive Western Conference. I think if you do trade for Anthony Davis, you got to hurt Anthony Davis already, and you got to semi-hurt LeBron James. So, if I'm the Lakers, I want to make this trade and start putting the pieces together now, starting for next year's round.
Kobe Bryant said something really interesting in the last 24 hours, and I wanted to get your perspective on it. He said that what James Harden down in Houston is doing is impressive, but it can't and won't lead to championship basketball. What do you make of the notion that the usage rate for Harden, how much he has the ball in his hands, his remarkable numbers are not going to be capable of leading to an actual championship for the Rockets?
I think that when you pose a question like that, it's really like a headline question. When you look and see what Kobe Bryant said and why he said it and how he said it, it made all the sense in the world. And so I don't think that, I think the headlines are saying, oh, Kobe said James Harden can't win a championship like that, but nobody's paying attention to the details and why he said it. So I think that, a lot of times we look at titles in the media and of course, as, analysts and people like that, I think it's important for us to run with titles. But when you actually listen to what Kobe was talking about, he was really praising James Harden for being able to accomplish something that is very hard to accomplish with it, with the position he plays, with the style of play that they play. And I think with that, what he was saying was it's going to be extremely difficult, and it's extremely difficult for any one person who has the ball the majority of the time to be extremely successful throughout the regular season and then in the playoffs.
Well, some of those details are that Harden's on track to have the ball in his hands the second most in the history of the NBA, behind, I think it was Westbrook, the year that he won the MVP, but that Thunder team didn't make it out of the first round of the playoffs. So if you're a Rockets fan and you obviously want to get at a minimum to where you were last year, which was knocking on the door of the finals, what is it that you need? Just health from your guys? Do you want, if you're Houston, to add some depth the next few days? How do you create a situation where Harden doesn't have to take the ball in his hands 41% of the time?
Well, if you look at it, Chris Paul has been out. They've been in this is a transition year for them. I don't care what anybody said. Losing Trevor Ariza, Bob Mute, you're losing glue guys on your team. So that's always tough to replace because you don't really understand the value of, a guy like a Trevor Ariza or a Bob Mute, but then also the value of Chris Paul and Chris Paul being hurt. Eric Gordon has been down this year. Capella's been out. So a lot of the responsibility has fallen on James' shoulder. And I think that, if anything, he stepped up to the challenge. For them to be successful, I'm not sure it's a trade. I'm not really sure what it is. I think that, when you're watching last year's Rocket team versus this year's Rocket team, they had a lot more weapons. And I think that, this year's Rocket team has a lot more injuries. And so hat off to James Harden for weathering the storm and shouldering the burden. And I think that, because he has the ball in his hands, what better person to trust out there than James if you don't have Chris Paul. But I think as guys start coming back and getting healthier, it's a chemistry thing with them. It's a ball movement thing with them. And I think that as the season progresses, you'll start seeing James kind of offload a little bit of that responsibility to Chris Paul and some of the other guys.
Baron, I'm always interested in guys who spend a lot of their lives, not their whole lives, but a lot of their lives, at least from the outside looking in, being defined by sports and what they do when they have the opportunity to retire younger than most of us. You went to acting, WTF Baron Davis on Fuse Network. You play a fictionalized version of yourself. Let's start with this. I'm so interested in it from my 4 years living in LA where everyone wants to be an actor. Why was that the thing that appealed to you at this stage in your life? For
me, I like making people laugh and having a good time. And, even when I played in the league, I was always, just like a funny person. Or, was always shooting viral videos when it started, just kind of fun things that I knew would translate. So for me, it was more so I love talking about basketball and being around the game, but at the same time, making film and TV and acting is something that I want to do with, the next 50 years of my life.
What is the degree of difficulty for you as you begin your acting career compared to when you were trying to establish yourself as a longtime NBA player?
I think, just being in the game to play. When you're playing basketball, you get invited to the camps. You get invited to showcase your skills. And so once you win, and you can work your way up. I think the difficult thing about Hollywood is actually getting in the game, right? Everybody wants to be a friend. Everybody wants to do things, but, you have to really, really prove yourself. And your chances come, kind of far and few in between. And so you just have to really just put your head down and do the work. And, for somebody like myself, I have to be sharp because, one thing can lead to the next if it's done well and I'm successful at doing it.
Well, Baron, congrats on that success and your new acting endeavor. We'll be watching on Fuse Network. Thanks for making time. Appreciate the insight, man.
Appreciate it, man. I'm glad this was able to work out.
All right, little secret. We woke Baron Davis up this morning. He was a little grumpy at the start of the interview, but that's okay. I'm grumpy before coffee too, Baron. I appreciate you fighting through it without caffeine and hanging out this year on the program. And we're going to keep hanging out here on the program. We're going to go inside the numbers on the NBA trade that could change the league when we come back to the show here in just a minute. right, welcome back into the show. You see Brandon Ingram. You see Kyle Kuzma. You may or may not see the future of the New Orleans Pelicans. It certainly won't include Anthony Davis. Those two gentlemen, currently Lakers, make up a big part of what reportedly would be involved in a trade to try to lure the brow to the purple and gold. We're going to go inside the numbers on what we think the Lakers' best offer looks like. And we start with the number 4, knowing that the deal hasn't gone through yet, but it may. Number 4, the Pelicans reportedly want the Lakers in any deal to include four first-round picks. And that doesn't include the second-rounders. Since teams aren't allowed to send back-to-back future first-rounders, LA would have to send NOLA its 2019, 21, 23, and 25 first-round picks. And we're not done, because the number 3 is up next. In addition to those picks, all 4 of them and the second-rounders, NOLA would still likely require the trio of Lonzo Ball, Kyle Kuzma, and Brandon Ingram, not to mention the inclusion of salary-matching veterans from LA, as well as the absorption of Pelicans' Solomon Hill's contract. There's more. 10.5 is next up. In the Lakers' most recent offer, which did include Ball and Kuzma and Ingram, that group of 3 combined makes more than $10.5 million less this season than Anthony Davis does by himself. How about number 4? AD has said there are just 4 teams he'd sign a long-term deal with after his current contract is up in 2020. Those teams are the Lakers, Clippers, Knicks, and Bucks. What a shock that none of them can actually pull off a trade. He might as well have said the Dubuque, Iowa Argonauts, because they have as much of a chance. Next up, number 2, the Lakers have just 2 more days until Thursday's trade deadline to make a suitable offer to New Orleans. Otherwise, the 6-time All-Star is staying put in the Big Easy until the offseason, giving Danny Ainge and the Celtics the chance to make a push on July 1. And finally, to give you some perspective on these young guys, where they're at today, they can evolve. The number is 8.5 up against 6. Anthony Davis's win share this year is 8.5. He's accounted by himself for 8.5 wins, and it's higher than the combined win shares of Ingram, Lonzo, and Kuzma combined. Ingram's win share 1.4, Lonzo's 1.9, Kuzma's is 2.7. Kuzma probably the highlight of the deal. It's going to be really interesting, and we talked about this, I think, last week on the show, whether or not the Pelicans are willing to negotiate with an organization, the Lakers, whose star player LeBron James is clearly pulling off through his buddy Rich Paul, who also happens to be his agent and AD's agent, the perfect collusion crime. That's what LeBron is doing. I guess good for him. Danny Ainge reportedly pushing behind the scenes, and a few sources of the NBA said he's been really aggressive in this respect, trying to tell Dell Demps and the folks in New Orleans, wait, hold, give us a July 1st, we will blow you away. Whoever gets blown away, or whether or not the Pelicans hold tight, you will know first right here on CBS Sports HQ, your home for streaming sports. We're going to keep you up to date. We've got Casey Kiernan taking over in about 30 seconds. He's great. And then 30 minutes from now, Sportsline will help you try to make a little bit of, you know what, a little bit of money with your sports insight. All that coming up in just a minute. This is Reiter's Block. I'm Bill Reiter. I'm back tomorrow here at 5 Eastern, 2 Pacific. See you then.